Hello and welcome everyone to the daily news analysis of today 7th of September 2023। तो आज की इम्पोर्टेंट आर्टिकल पहला जो है एशियन ए की पिलर ऑफ एक्ट ईस्ट पॉलिसी मोदी says according to Modi, then India Bharat and a host of implications bridging the malnutrition gap, the Bemetara way for an expanse of blue with air so clean, then taking G20 to the last mile, leaving none behind। पेज नंबर 13 का है ये। देन हसीना's daughter, नेपाल WHO veteran vie for India's vote। नेक्स्ट है CDSCO issues alert after pharma firms recalls antacid syrups। Then India and Bharat returned to align varied views in Constituent Assembly। नेक्स्ट जो है न्यू कोल्ड वॉर, चाइना टेल्स ए नेशंस एट एशियन मीट। नेक्स्ट जो है G20 could pave way for crypto regulations, financial inclusion। Then Das asked fintechs to keep to governance, adopt self regulations। लास्ट जो आर्टिकल है viability gap funding for battery energy storage gets government node। ये पेज नंबर 16 का आर्टिकल है। पहला जो है एशियन ए की पिलर ऑफ एक्ट ईस्ट पॉलिसी अकॉर्डिंग टू मोदी। द एसोसिएशन ऑफ Southeast Asian nations is an important pillar of India's Act East policy, said Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Wednesday, as he left for Indonesia to attend the 20th ASEAN Indian Summit, 18th East Asia Summit in Jakarta। Mr. Modi will meet with leaders of the 10 Asian countries on Thursday, followed immediately by the EAS meeting, which includes leaders of all Asian nations of Australia, China, India, Japan, New Zealand, South Korea, Russia, and US. While Mr. Modi will return immediately after the summit, so as to be in Delhi in time for the arrival of guests of G20 summit. Many leaders present in India, Indonesia, and Indonesian President Joko Widodo himself will also travel to Delhi on Friday. I look forward to discussing with Asian leaders the future contour of our partnership, which has now entered its fourth decade. Engagement with ASEAN is an important pillar of India's Act East policy. The comprehensive strategic partnership entered into last year has injected new dynamism in our ties, said Mr. Modi in a departure statement, adding that he hopes to discuss issues of importance to the region, including food and energy security, environment, health, and digital transformation at the ESA summit. After landing in Jakarta, he will attend the two back-to-back summits and leave for Delhi, officials said on Tuesday. New Delhi thanked Indonesia for rescheduling the event into one morning so as to facilitate Mr. Modi's attendance. Jaishankar's meeting. Meanwhile, just ahead of G20 summit, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met with Russian Foreign Ministry Sergei Lavrov in Jakarta on Wednesday, significant given Russia's oppositions to the language on Ukraine, which, along with other objections from China, are holding up the leaders' declaration due to be released at the summit in Delhi this weekend. In a social media post after the meeting, Mr. Jaishankar wrote that they had discussed the East Asia Summit and G20 issues, adding that it had included a useful stock taking of our bilateral and multilateral operations. The next editorial का portion है इंडिया भारत एंड ए होस्ट ऑफ implications। इंडिया भारत एंड ए होस्ट ऑफ implications। There are historical, ideological, constitutional, and international implications associated with the word. With the words Bharat and India, a political dimension has been added to these names. Words arising out of some opposition parties coming together under the banner and acronym India for the Indian National Development Inclusive Alliance. For these parties in the opposition, the unprecedented use of a President of Bharat instead of a President of India, as seen in an invitation card by the President to the head of the states of government and Chief Minister for an official banquet on the occasion of the G20 summit, is on account of Narendra Modi government's concern that India may become politically potent. Keeping politics aside, it would be useful to examine some of the other aspects mentioned in the first sentence to arrive at a degree of clarity on Bharat and India. From the pages of history, a a brief look at the controversy raised by the Muslim League over the name India in 1947 would be in order. The transfer of power from the British to Indian hands in 1947 was through the British Parliament's Indian Independence Act of 1947. It created two dominions, India and Pakistan, and released the princely states from the British paramountcy, thereby technically making them independent and sovereign. At the same time, British advised the princely states to join one of the two dominions. Most did so before August 15, 1947. Thus, two dominions came into being in what was British India and princely states in the subcontinent. Pakistani leader favored that India should be named either Hindustan or Bharat. They argued that two successor states had emerged from the dissolution of the British Indian Empire, Pakistan and Hindustan or Bharat. India's position was that it was the successor state to British India in terms of international law and that Pakistan had seceded seceded from India. Hence, while India retained its international personality, including its membership of the United Nations, Pakistan as a new state created through secession would have to take steps to acquire an international personality. The matter was finally decided in India's favor, and Pakistan was compelled to take steps to establish its international status, including applying for a membership of the United Nations, which incidentally Afghanistan opposed. India retained the name India in all international and multilateral fora. Thus, the country's international personality was and continues to be denoted by the word India. Generally, whenever the English language is used in international, multilateral, and or bilateral settings, the word India is used. The latest example is the joint statement issued on August 25 on Prime Minister Modi's visit to Greece. It is available on the Ministry of External Affairs website and it is entitled India Greece Joint Statement. The last sentence of this document says Prime Minister Narendra Modi extended an invitation to Prime Minister Mitsotakis to visit India. The letter of confidence, in letters of credence in English given by the President of India to ambassadors designate under the lion's emblem the words in Hindi Rashtrapati Bharat Ganatantra are written and under them the words President Republic of India written in English. Thus in Hindi Bharat is used while in English it is India. Under the 58th Amendment, for an authoritative background of English and Hindi versions, it is best to turn to the 58th Amendment of the Constitution done in 1987. Its statements of objects and reasons mentions that the Constitution of India was adopted by the Constituent Assembly in English. A Hindi translation of the Constitution signed by the members of the Constituent Assembly was also published in 1950 under the authority of the President of the Constituent Assembly in accordance with a resolution adopted by that assembly. The 58th Amendment empowered the President to have published under his authority the authoritative text in Hindi language of the Constitution, which could be used in the legal process too. Thus, the Hindi text of the Constitution published by the government following the amendment is authoritative. The English language version of the Constitution is entitled Constitution of India. Its Article 1 Clause 1 is India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. The primacy in these formulations is given to the word India. The Hindi version is titled Bharat का संविधान. Article 1 Clause 1 in the Hindi version reads भारत अर्थात इंडिया राज्यों का संघ होगा. The word अर्थात means that is. Clearly, in the Hindi version, primacy is given to the word Bharat. The logic of the formulation has led to the practice of using the word India in English language and Bharat in Hindi. That practice has prevailed in internal documents as well as international documents, which are generally in English. Thus, the gazette published in English is called the Gazette of India, and the Hindi, that is Bharat ka Rajpatra. It is true that the words India and its variants such as Hind in Arabic are of foreign origin. It is generally believed that these were used by foreigners to denote the land south and east of the Indus and Sindhu River. During Afghan and Mughal rule, the northern areas of the Indian subcontinent were largely referred to as Hindustan, and later the European, especially the British, roughly referred to not only the northern region but also to all the subcontinent as India. However, for them it was a geographical expression. The rise of a consciousness that all the people living in the Indian subcontinent constituted a single nation was a product of the Indian Renaissance. One of its streams sought ancient roots for Indian nationalism that gave rise to the idea, especially among sections particularly devoted to the revival of India's ancient civilization past, that it was unacceptable that the country and the nation could carry a name given by foreigners. For them, the preferred word was Bharat with its variation in different languages. For others, such as Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, a syncretic word perhaps acceptable to the most people, including those believing in different faiths, was more useful. That word was and it is used even today, and the emotive expression Jai Hind is used by public personalities and the highest office holder in her speech on Independence Day this year. The President of India, Draupadi Murmu, concluded by saying Jai Hind, Jai Bharat. The risk of alienation. It is now clear that the Sangh Parivar and the Narendra Modi government wish to use the word Bharat. Their preference for Bharat instead of the word India is clear. The use of the formulation President of Bharat in G20 invitation is a giveaway. They may also begin to use Bharat in the English language in the government's internal document. The problem is that they cannot do so internationally unless they officially change the country's name to Bharat and drop India. By doing so, they may alienate parts of country which prefer India to Bharat. In any event, the tradition of using India in English and Bharat in Hindi is wise and constitutionally correct. Should its change be a priority now? The next we have bridging the malnutrition gap the Bemetara way. Bimetara way. It is often said that simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication. Experience has taught us that simple things may not always be easy but are often the most effective solutions. In this light, counseling people on eating and feeding practices along with monitoring their progress can prove to be a game changer. Over the years, the government has made painstaking efforts to ensure food security. Now, children have midday meals in their schools, and people receive monthly rations through an ever improving public distribution system. Ready to eat packets and hot meals are served to mothers and children at Anganwadi centers. Under the Prime Minister's overarching schemes for holistic nourishment, Poshan, Poshan Abhiyan, further various add-ons such as egg, banana, protein powder, peanut, chicky, and jaggery are also being distributed under various special state-specific schemes. As an example being the Mukhyamantri Suposhan Yojana in Chhattisgarh, but nutrition security is still a distant dream. People often lack knowledge of proper eating and feeding practices. Myths around food and increased accessibility to highly processed food have compounded the problem. Nutrition Council can potentially be the answer to this problem. It is important to note that Jan Andolan or Social and Behavior Change Communication (SBCC) has been a facet of Poshan Abhiyan. This includes bicycle rallies, plantation of Poshan Batikas, celebration of Poshan Pakhwaras, and good Good varieties. Different states have held various awareness programs under the SBCC. However, the concept of nutrition counseling has yet to be properly institutionalized and implemented uniformly across states. In fact, according to the Poshan Abhiyan Progress Report 2018, a focused and coherent SBCC action plan is essential to take the work of Poshan Abhiyan forward. Thus, there is a need for field staff to be properly trained in nutritional counseling, and there is a need for it to be implemented mandatorily and uniformly by states. Lessons from Bemetara. Bemetara in Chhattisgarh is a puzzling district in the context of its malnutrition status, situated in the fertile plains of Chhattisgarh. It is unaffected by Naxalites activities and is agriculturally rich. Its inhabitants are also relatively affluent. However, the number of severe acute malnutrition children there was as high as 3,299 in December 2022. This figure bears a striking resemblance to the situation in the tribal dominated and Naxal affected districts such as Bastar. It points to the lack of proper knowledge about feeding practices. The problem is not about access but improper knowledge around when, how, and what to eat. This is why nutrition counseling combined with robust monitoring was chosen as the modus operandi for this area. Put Put Laika Abhiyan, which means a healthy child mission. Literal translation in the Chhattisgarhi language is a nutritional counseling program that is being implemented in 72 of the most affected AWC Anganwadi in the Bemetara subdivision of Bemetara district. It has technical support of UNICEF Chhattisgarh. Here, ground level staff from the Health and Women and Child Development Department have been well trained on how to provide nutrition counseling in the region. Every Friday, the parents of the targeted SAM and medium acute malnutrition (MAM) children are summoned and counseled. They are taught in simple Chhattisgarhi language the importance and the constituents of Tiranga Tiranga Bhojan, a balanced diet. The need to wash hands regularly and many other tips in order to lead a healthy lifestyle. Many harmful dietary myths and superstitions are dispelled as well. The progress of the targeted children is being monitored. Local leaders such as Sarpanch, Panchayat Sachivs and religious heads have also participated in the counseling session. Door visit to the houses of targeted children are also done to monitor their progress. Data that is encouraging and significant. As a result of the simple mantra of nutrition counseling along with regular monitoring and evaluation, as many as 53.77% of targeted children were brought out of malnutrition by the Port Laika Abhiyan in a span of 9 months from December 2022 to July 2023. 599 out of 1114 children. Further, 61.5% of MAM children are 14 and 14.67% of SAM children have been brought out of malnutrition. These figures are both encouraging and statistically significant when comparing this with a random control group of 20 AWCs where this mission was not being implemented. Only 30.6% children were taken out of malnutrition, that is 33.8% MM children. 0 SAM children were taken out of malnutrition. This shows a total increase of 23% over and above the control groups, which is very encouraging. Further, while providing meals requires elaborate budgeting and the risk of leakage, this mission is a zero cost one requiring no more than a few training sessions and regular monitoring. Thus, it has shown itself to be cost effective as well. From the experience highlighted, there is no doubt that this model needs to be replicated on a larger scale across districts and states. Providing food to the poor needs to be supported with nutrition counseling and monitoring in order to truly, yes, accelerate the eradication of malnutrition. It is only when this simple but impactful strategy of nutrition counseling is followed both in letter and spirit that India can move closer towards achieving the ambitious yet noble dream of कुपोषण मुक्त भारत. Then next you have for an expanse of blue with air so clean. Then for an expanse of blue with air so clean. According to United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the Earth has entered the era of global boiling, scorching heat waves, devastating floods, and erratic weather patterns are stark reminder for an urgent need to address the triple planetary crisis of biodiversity loss, climate change and pollution. The world the world is not just grappling with climate change but also with another silent killer, air pollution. Global health statistics reveal a disturbing scenario with lung cancer claiming 10 million deaths worldwide in 2020 as stated in the World Health Organization fact sheets published in 2023. This could soar by another 3.2 million by 2050, according to a report mapping of global, regional, and national incidence, mortality, and mortality to incidence ratio of lung cancer in 2020 and 2050 by the Indian National Institute of Health. South Asia, home to 2 billion people, is also home to 9 of the world's 10 most polluted cities, including Delhi, where the air quality continues to pose a perilous long-term threat, putting its inhabitants at risk each day. While policy measures have led to statistical improvement in the air quality index, the health risk associated with Delhi's polluted air persists. Delhi is knocked to its knees every winter, facing hazardous level of air pollution, lung cancer, cardiovascular disorder, respiratory alignment, and mental health issues continue to destroy lives. And Delhi's air a lethal mix of SO2, sulfur dioxide, and NOx, nitrogen oxide, along with a high particulate matter concentration 2.5 or even 10 microgram per meter cube, carbon monoxide and ozone deprive over 30 million residents of their human rights to breathe clean air. The air pollution tool is troublesome, especially for immunocompromised individuals, pregnant women, children, and the elderly. As per a Lancet report, 1.67 million pollution-related deaths were attributed to air pollution in India in 2019, accounting for a staggering 17.8% of the total death in the country. Efforts to combat this crisis are already being made. States, governments, research institutions, and NGOs are pioneering the solutions such as the PUSA decomposer developed by the Indian Agricultural Research Institute, employing biotechnology to address agricultural pollution. State level policies such as a GRAP 3 graded rapid action plan, monitoring air quality in hotspot, and establishing clean green water rooms have shown some potential. Many innovative startups involving young entrepreneurs are turning agricultural waste into vulnerable products. Variable solutions. Acknowledging the existence of air pollution remains the primary step towards solutions. Next comes a debate on viable solution and actions, many of which are already known. Eventually, these best practices need to be implemented. Without implementation, the best laid out plans will not lead to any improvement. Globally, cities such as Ljubljana, Slovenia, Accra, Ghana, Seville, Spain, Bogota, Colombia, Medellin, Colombia, epi- epitomize the power of prioritizing human health and environmental sustainability. Car-free zones, green spaces, smart urban design, electrified public transportation, nature-based solutions, and innovative biotechnology demonstrate positive results. China's shift to clean energy and e-mobility after battling severe pollution. Indonesia's project on carbon efficient farming, assessing biomass to reduce CO2 emissions. Thailand and Vietnam undertaking measures to reduce open straw burning are all glimpse of hope. UNESCO's initiatives to combat air pollution include implementing an internal carbon tax on all flight tickets and investing in emissions reduction measures. The World Air Quality Project allows resident to make informed decision by real time air quality data. In collaboration with UNEP, environmentally conscious practices have been introduced, such as digital working via the virtual meetings project. Clean air for schools is spreading education among all for clean air. Other laudable activities include switching to electricity vehicle, replacing lighting system to greener LED arrangements, implementing solar powered offices, protecting historical sites by developing strategy to curb air pollution and effective green solution, urban forest parks, green corridors. Youngsters around the world are taking charge of environmental advocacy, running marathons, and taking real-time data of air quality, creating environmental awareness. But the absence of a specific sustainable development goal for clean air to breathe indicates a lack of global attention. However, in 2019, laying emphasis on the interest of the international community for clean air and the need to improve air quality, the United Nations General Assembly decided to designate September 7 as the International Day for Clean Air for Blue Skies. Nevertheless, clean air remains a long stride in many megacities and other places. We hope that a concerted action to the symmetry systematically improve the air quality, including in Delhi, will receive priority attention. The problem has been caused by people, so it should be people who will find and apply solutions supported by innovative, adequate air quality policies and action plans. As we inhale the consequences of our actions, the ultimate question becomes: are we the torch bearers of the of change for the future of our planet, or will we be silent bystanders who let pollution script a tragic ending? And next, we are taking G20 to the last mile, leaving none behind. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, these words capture a deep philosophy. It means the word is one family. This is an all-embracing outlook that encourages us to progress as one universal family, transcending borders, language, and ideology. During the India's G20 presidency, this has translated into a call for human-centric progress as one Earth. We are coming together to nurture our planet as one family. We support each other in pursuit of growth, and we move together towards a shared future. One future which is an undeniable truth in these interconnected times. The post-pandemic world order is very different from the world before it. There are three important changes among others. First, there is a growing realization that a shift away from GDP-centric view of the world to a human-centric view is needed. Second, the world is recognizing the importance of resilience and reliability in the global supply chain. Third, there is a collective call for boosting multilateralism through the reform of global institutions. Our G20 presidency has played the role of a catalyst in this shift. In December 2022, when we look over the presidency from Indonesia, I had written that a mindset shift must be catalyzed by G20 this year. This was especially needed in the context of mainstreaming the marginalized aspirations of developing countries, the Global South and Africa. The Voice of Global South Summit, which witnessed participations from 125 countries, was one of the foremost initiatives under the presidency. It was an important exercise to gather inputs and ideas from the global south. Further, our presidency has not only seen the largest ever participation from African countries but has also pushed for the inclusion of African Union as permanent member of the G20. An interconnected world means our challenges across domains are interlinked. This is the midway year of 2030 agenda, and many are noting with great concern that the progress on sustainable development goals is off track. The G20 2023 action plan on accelerating progress on SDGs will spearhead the future direction of the G20 towards implementing SDGs. In India, living in harmony with nature has been a norm since ancient times, and we have been contributing our share towards climate action. Even in modern times, many countries of the global south are at various stages of development, and climate action must be a complementary pursuit. Ambitions for climate action must be matched with action on climate finance and a transfer of technology. We believe there is a need to move away from the purely restrictive attitude of what should not be done to a more constructive attitude focusing on what can be done to fight climate change. The Chennai High Level Principle for sustainable and resilient blue economy focus on keeping our ocean healthy. A global ecosystem for clean and green hydrogen will emerge from our presidency along with a green hydrogen innovation center. Global Biofuel Alliance in 2015 we launched the International Solar Alliance. Now through the Global Biofuel Alliance we will support the world to enable energy transition in tune with the benefits of a circular economy, democratizing climate action in the best way to impart momentum to the movement. Just as individuals make daily decisions based on their long-term health and they can make lifestyle decisions based on the impact on the planet's long-term health. Just like yoga became a global mass movement for wellness, we have also nudged the global within lifestyle for sustainable environment. Due to the impact of climate change, ensuring food and nutritional security will be crucial. Millets, Syriana can help with this while also boosting climate smart agriculture. In the International Year of Millets, we have taken millets to global pellets. The Deccan High Level Principle on food security and nutrition is also helpful in these directions. Technology is transformative, but it also needs to be made inclusive. In the past, the benefits of technological advancement have not benefited all sections of society equally. India over the last few years has shown how technology can be leveraged to narrow inequalities rather than widen them. For instance, the billions across the world that remain unbanked or lack digital identities can be financially included through the digital public infrastructure. The solutions we have built using our DPIs have now been recognized globally. Now, through the G20, we will help developing countries adapt, build, and scale DPI to unlock the power of inclusive growth. That India is the fastest growing large economy is no accident. Our simple, scalable, and sustainable solutions have empowered the vulnerable and the marginalized to lead our development story from space to sports economy to entrepreneurship. India women have taken the lead in various sectors. They have shifted the narrative from the development of women to women-led development. Our G20 presidency is working on bridging the gender digital divide, reducing labor forces participation gaps and enabling a larger role for women in leadership and decision making. For India, G20 presidency is not merely a high level diplomatic endeavor. As mother of democracy and a model of diversity, we opened the doors of this experience to the world. Today, accomplishing things at scales is a quantity quality that is associated with India. The G20 presidency is no exception. It has become a people-driven movement. Over 200 meetings will have been organized in 60 Indian cities across the length and breadth of our nations, hosting nearly 1 lakh delegates from 125 countries by the end of our term. No presidency has ever encompassed such a vast and diverse geographical expanse. It is one thing to hear about India's democracy, diversity, and development from someone else. It is totally different to experience them firsthand. I am sure our G20 delegates would vouch for this. Our G20 presidency strives to bridge divide, dismantle barriers, and sow seeds of collaboration that nourish a world where unity prevails over discord, where the shared destiny eclipses isolation. As the G20 president, we had pledged to make the global table larger, ensuring that every voice is heard and every country contributes. I am positive that we have matched our pledge with action and outcomes. Then next जो है हसीना's daughter नेपाल WHO veteran भाई for India's vote. India faces a top choice as a close neighbor. Nepal and Bangladesh have both decided to nominate candidate for the post of regional director of World Health Organization (WHO). The election will also come up for discussion on the sidelines of the G20 summit this weekend. The candidates include Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's daughter Saima Wajed, who is going head to head with one of the WHO senior most officials, Shambhu Prasad Acharya, who is from Nepal. The election of WHO Southeast Asia Regional Office CRO Director will be held in New Delhi during a closed-door session from October 30 to November 2. The winner will be declared based on the majority of the votes from 11 members: Bangladesh, Bhutan, North Korea, India, Indonesia, the Maldives, Myanmar, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Timor-Leste. India's Poonam Khetrapal Singh has held the CRO director's post since 2014. Still, sometimes asked about the India's position, government officials said there was still some time before a decision would be made on whether to support Mr. Wajed or Mr. Acharya for the post, but indicated that the Bangladesh candidate had an edge given the importance of the India-Bangladesh relationship as well as Prime Minister Hasina's backing for the candidate. However, officials considered that as any election within the United Nations system, much will depend on each CRO member country's negotiations with Bangladesh and Nepal as they work on a system of reciprocity in return, garnering support on some other United Nations vote for themselves. While Mr. Acharya, who is currently the director country strategy and support for WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus and based at the WHO's Geneva headquarters, is seen as an insider with considerable experience in the role. Mrs. Wajed, who is a psychologist by training and an advisor to the Bangladesh government, is running a high-powered diplomatic campaign, and sources said she will accompany Mrs. Hasina on her visit to Delhi, where Bangladesh is among the G20 special invitees. Meanwhile, Mr. Ghebreyesus will also be in Delhi for the event also, along with a big WHO delegation who are understood to be favoring their colleague Mr. Acharya for the role. Both sides are expected to actively campaign with CRO's member as well as with those countries who have influence in the region. On Wednesday, Mrs. Wajed, who officially titled is chairperson of Bangladesh National Advisory Committee on Autism and Neurodevelopmental Disorder, accompanied Bangladesh Muhammad Shahabuddin to the ASEAN Summit and met with Indonesian Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi in Jakarta, and is also expected to canvass the support of other Asian members, Myanmar, Thailand, and Timor-Leste. Greater ties. The bilateral discussion between Bangladesh and Indonesia were constructive, and we look forward to the greater ties and cooperation between our two nations, Mr. Wajed said in a social media post. Prior to this, Mr. Wajed accompanied her mother to the BRICS summit in South Africa in August, where Bangladesh was an invitee and met Chinese President Xi Jinping during a bilateral meeting in Johannesburg. Meanwhile, The Nepal government has also activated its campaign, one that is not as high profile, and held a meeting of CRO member ambassadors in Kathmandu last week. At the meeting, diplomatic sources said Mr. Acharya made a presentation and asked for the support of all members on the basis of his career as a public health official, including his position at the WHO, where he served in Dhaka and Delhi, and at the head office in Geneva for the past 24 years. The Nepal government has also activated others within the United Nations system for support in what is being seen as an unequal battle, given Bangladesh's position in the region as well as the particular push from its highest office. Then as a CDSCO issue alert after Pharma Farm recall antacid syrup. The Central Drug Standard Control Organization (CDSCO) has altered healthcare professional, consumers, patients, wholesalers, distributor, and regulatory authorities to voluntarily recall of the antacid syrup Digen gel manufactured by Abbott India at its Goa facility. The public notice issued by the Apex Drug Controller on its website said the impunged product may be unsafe and its use may result in adverse reactions. The Drug Controller General of India, DGCI, who heads the CDSCO, also advised the doctors and healthcare professionals to carefully prescribe and educate their patients to discontinue the use and to report any adverse drug reactions arising from the consumption of Digen gel. The drug controllers notice said the company initially withdrew one batch of its product available in mint flavor and four batches in orange flavor after receiving a complaint about a product that was white and had bitter taste and pungent smell. In early August, within a week, the company recalled all batches of its Digen syrup sold in mint, orange, and milk fruit flavor manufactured at its Goa facility. CDSCO urged distributors and users to discontinue the use while stating that there is no need to panic. The drug is known to relieve acidity and its symptoms such as heartburn, stomach discomfort, abdominal pain, and gas. Abbott India spokesperson noted that the company had voluntarily recalled the medicine due to isolated consumer complaints on taste and odor. The next day, India and Bharat returned to align varied views in Constituent Assembly. Constituent Assembly debates show that India and Bharat were retained as names of the newly independent nation in the constitution to align contrasting thoughts voiced by its makers in 1948. The debate in the Constituent Assembly happened while discussing the draft Article 1 Clause 1 of the Constitution, which had simply read India shall be a union of states. For some members of the Constituent Assembly, the name India retained a sense of continuity and familiarity, especially among foreign nations. Union of India. India has been known as India throughout history and throughout all these past years. B.R. Ambedkar, who headed the committee drafting the constitution, said he was opposing an amendment to Article 1, Clause 1 that India should be known as Union of India. He reasoned that the name of the country was India as a member of United Nations. All agreements had been signed under the name, but there were others who believed that giving the country an ancient name would not quit the march forward. Member said Govind Das said that by supporting the name Bharat, he was not as how Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and other members believed, looking backward, befitting our history. I also want that there should be scientific invention in this country. By naming our country as Bharat, we are not doing anything which will prevent prevent us from marching forward. We should indeed give such a name to our country as many as may be befitting our history and our culture, he said. He said even the Chinese traveler Xuanzang had called this country Bharat in his book Varied Amendments. Likewise, member Shibam Siban Lal Saxena had moved an amendment to change the name of the union to Bharat. His amendment also wanted Hindi written in the Devanagari script to the Devanagari script to be the national language of Bharat. The debates ended with the addition of Bharat to Article 1 Clause 1. The article currently reads India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. A row over the names of the country has erupted with a G20 dinner invitation going out in the name of the President of Bharat. In fact, some of the Constituent Assembly members had wanted the term states in the Article 1 to be replaced with Pradesh. But Pandit Nehru had objected, saying Pradesh is a word which has no definition, no one knows what it means. It is a very good word, and gradually it may begin to get a significance, and then, of course, it can be used either in the constitution or otherwise. At the present moment, the nominal use of word varies if in hundreds of different ways, and the word state is infinitely more precise, more definite, not only for the outside world but even for us. Then avoid a new Cold War, China tells nations at Asian meet. To keep differences under control, what is essential now is to oppose picking sides, to oppose bloc confrontation, and to oppose a new Cold War, said Chinese Premier Li Qiang at the summit. China's premier said on Wednesday that major powers must keep their differences under control and avoid a new Cold War in a thinly veiled reference to Washington as top Asian and US officials gathered for talks in Indonesia. Beijing has expressed concern about US-backed blocs forming on its doorstep while facing disputes with other powers in the region over the South China Sea and other issues. Disagreements and disputes may arise between countries due to misperceptions, diverging interest, or external interference, Li Qiang said at the start of an ASEAN Plus 3 meeting with Japan, South Korea in Jakarta to keep differences under control. What is essential now is to oppose picking sides, to oppose bloc confrontation, and to oppose a new Cold War. The 10 member associations of the Southeast Asian nations, ASEAN, is holding separate summit with China, Japan, South Korea, thus US and Canada on Wednesday, providing an arena for big powers to lobby the bloc and their rivalries to play out. US Vice President Kamala Harris is attending in place of President Joe Biden, while Mr. Lee was taking part instead of President Xi Jinping. The Chinese premier's comments came after Beijing's Defense Minister Li Shangfu in June warned against establishing NATO-like alliances in the Asia-Pacific region, calling for inclusive operation instead of small cliques at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. देन नेक्स्ट जो है दो आर्टिकल्स हैं. पहला जो है G20 could pave way for crypto regulation, financial inclusion, and नेक्स्ट जो है Das asks fintechs to keep to governance, adapt to self regulations. Top officials signals a broad consensus among G20 members during talks. G20 leaders to now decide on how countries can regulate crypto assets. Indonesia's G20 presidency could leave a lasting legacy for the world's financial architecture by paving the way for global temperature to regulate crypto assets, steering a shake-up of multilateral development banks that could yield additional financing of $200 billion over 8 years to help countries deal with emerging challenges and advancing financial inclusion. Top officials signaled that a broad consensus has emerged among the members of the G20 finance track during talks on these issues, with finance minister and central bank governor welcoming 17 deliverable and endorsing 10 outcomes being pursued under India's presidency. The likely agreed outcomes which need to be ratified by G20 leaders at the upcoming summit in New Delhi include a plan to enhance the capacity of countries to understand the proposed two-pillar framework to tax revenues of malnutrition farms and global tech giants for urban administration around the world. The Finance City Development plans the use of information shared by a nation through tax information exchange parties for non-tax purpose is also being pursued. G20 leaders will now decide on how countries can together get together to regulate crypto assets more effectively. An official said India has brought the regulations of these assets on the agenda of G20, whose rule gained greater importance amid global financial sector was in 1999 and 2008. The official added, "Crypto challenge: a single country cannot regulate cryptocurrencies effectively. We have discussed the building blocks for such regulations and a roadmap arrived in consultation with the International Monetary Fund, whom we roped into advice on macroeconomic implications of these assets and Financial Stability Board," the official added, noting that India has highlighted the specific risk for emerging markets and developing economies from these virtual assets on the reforms of multilateral development banks based on the recommendation of a global expert group appointed under the Indian G20 presidency. The official said the group is expected to submit its second report with a roadmap for challenges by the next month, and that it would be taken up at the World Bank and IMF annual meeting scheduled in Marrakesh starting October. India has also been appointed the co-chair of the Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion till 2026 to help implement a financial inclusion action plan using digital public infrastructure, which G20 members have recognized as being supportive of inclusive growth and sustainable development. Thus asked fintechs to keep to governance, adopt self-regulation. Reserve Bank of India Governor Shaktikant Das on Wednesday urged fintech companies to lay emphasis on three critical aspects of customer centricity, governance, and self-regulation in order to ensure long-term success in their model. He also asked the fintech firms to form a self-regulatory organization (SRO) within a year for better regulation of the sector in the dynamics and ever-evolving world of business. It is easy to get caught up in the pursuit of the revenue bottom lines and the relentless drive for valuation. Sometimes it is forgotten that the success of any enterprise is intricately tied to the satisfaction and trust of its customer. This is the first critical issue I wish to highlight. Mr. Das told delegates at the Global FinTech Fest 2023, urging fintech firms to develop a culture in which continuous feedback mechanism were embedded in the business strategy. He said they must design solutions that safely and efficiently meet customers' needs to elicit trust of customers and also meet business objectives in a sustainable manner. This can be achieved through simplified user interface and a quick customer grievance redress mechanism. Avoiding customer harassment is essential to achieving long-term customer trust. The RBI governor emphasized highlighting that digital innovations at times had led to cyber risk and data security related issues. He said the mushrooming of illegal loan apps, many of which had their origin in foreign jurisdiction, had led to serious concerns about the breach of data privacy, unethical business conduct, levying of exorbitant interest rate and harsh recovery practices. Prudential safeguards. This highlights the urgent need to ensure that innovations are accompanied by prudential safeguards and responsible conduct. It is also imperative that regulated entities operate within the perimeter set by the licensing condition and only undertake activities which are permitted under the regulation. Mr. Das said fintech firms could demonstrate their commitment to transparency, accountability, and responsible decision making by providing clear governance structure and establishing an effective self-regulatory structure. Then आज का जो लास्ट आर्टिकल है, viability gap funding for battery energy storage gets government nod. The Union Cabinet on Wednesday approved viability gap funding (VGF) for the development of battery energy storage system (BESS). The program will support battery energy storage capacity of 4,000 megawatts hour to be developed by 2030-31. Minister Anurag Information Minister Anurag Thakur said, adding that the government will offer incentives worth up to 40% of capital cost to companies setting up a manufacturing unit. Budgetary support. The funding for the development of a BESS scheme with an initial outlay of 9,400 crore rupees, including a budgetary support of 3,760 crore rupees, signified the governor's commitment to sustainable energy solutions. The center said a minimum of 85% of the BESS project capacity would be made available to DISCOMs. The selection of the BESS developers for BGF grants would be carried out through a transparent competitive bidding process, the government said, with Reuters imputes. So this is all for today, and we will continue from tomorrow onwards. So thank you all.